everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we're here with these lovely INTPs, and we're here to discuss how INTPs can feel like the way that they talk may sometimes be misinterpreted by other people as criticism or critiquing. Before we get into that, I am going to have everyone introduce themselves. And so, Ian, would you like to share a little bit about you?
Sure. I'm Ian. For those interested, I'm Enneagram 5, wing 6 or 4, I don't know. And I'm a tutor. Got into type over COVID.
Nice.
Okay, I'll go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew, also Enneagram 5. At least most INTPs I've met tend to be, I don't know, the ones I know are 5s, but I'm sure there's. And I love math and physics, and I teach that for a living. And that's pretty much it.
Hi, my name's Brady. I'm an INTP, obviously. I'm an Enneagram 5 as well, I imagine. And I'm kind of half retired, I guess is one way to put it. So I spend my days doing INTP things, like thinking all day.
That's one of their favorite things, for sure. When I ask an INTP what puts them into flow state, they'll say thinking, and that's lovely for them. So this panel really represents a host of INTP hobbies such as math and physics, robotics, or looking at things through telescopes. And so, hi everyone, my name is Joyce, and I'm a certified MBTI master practitioner, and I facilitate the instrument in organizations. I also coach people, and I help people on the discovery process of figuring out their best fit type. And today, we're going to tackle the Critic Archetype and how an INTP's tone is interpreted. And so we'll start the panel off with a story that Brady has around the Critic Archetype and your thoughts around that.
Yeah, so it's a pretty simple story. I have an INTP friend who's done some purpose work and has a healer kind of archetype that they, I guess, subscribe to. I don't know how that works exactly, but I've thought about mine a lot, and I feel that the critic archetype suits me well. I don't think I could be a healer, but it must be nice because people seek healers out. People typically don't seek critics out. We seek you out. And I don't think people misconstrue what I say as criticism. That's usually what I mean. Sometimes I'm better at hiding it than others. So I was curious how other INTPs felt about this. Andrew was saying maybe this is a TI thing, which I think it is. But I thought maybe we could explore, at least to start, how it manifests in the INTP personality type.
Yeah, I mean, as so many INTPs mentioned, it's at the end of the day, it's a search for the truth, and I think that's what kicks in what you call, to me, the critique archetype. But it's not so much. It's like I just want to know the right thing, and so that's always, I think, the goal, the main thing for at least most INTPs I know. The core of it is what is the truth, and I think that can be misunderstood by a lot of people as trying to critique or trying to be annoying, when in reality you just want to know the point. What is really someone trying to say? For example, when you're hearing someone talking, and you might point out the flaws or the illogic or the inconsistencies in their speech, not because you annoy the person, because you really get the sense of, okay, I want to get to the point, I want to get to the truth, and here there's something missing, something's not connecting. And so I think as INTP, sometimes personally I'll naively do that, and my sort of FE them comes in and says, well, wait, you can't just talk like that to people, you have to massage it, you have to put it out in a certain way, and to me that's the dynamic with me. It's at one moment I want to scream at the person, tell them, no, you're not making any sense there. And at the same time, I experience it as an FE that tells me, no, you're in a social setting. You can't just exactly say what you think. Sometimes you have to say it in a way that's more acceptable by the other person. And to me, that's always a fight. It's always tension within me. I never know when to find that balance. It's a challenge, always.
Yeah, and I wonder if that kind of self-censorship can feel a little bit unsatisfying. So it's like, oh, I have to beat around the bush, I have to sugarcoat things in order for it to be accepted. Why can't I just say the truth or say what I'm thinking? It doesn't have to be the truth. It can be refined through another person. But why is it seen as unwanted in a way.
Yes.
But I'm curious about Ian. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think definitely a struggle. It's hard to let something slide. And then also sometimes I just want to give up and I'm like, it's fine. I just won't add any emotional content to this message and I'll just speak it plainly and people don't like that. So.
Yeah. And this has helped me a lot personally as well. So for example, like, so I teach math and I have a bunch of INTP students taking the upper math. And a lot of time they will just scream out, like, let's say I make a mistake. They'll just say, no, that's wrong over there. But, you can't talk like that. The teacher's supposed to say, hey, Mr. whatever, I'm sorry, but I believe there's a mistake. But I understand them. So I sympathize with them. They just, they're just trying to call out the mistake because they're seeking the truth. And so that helped me definitely to understand other INTPs, especially when they're younger and they don't have that patience. I mean, I still struggle with it, but it's definitely better now than before when I was much younger, where I just didn't have the patience. I would just scream it out almost in a TE way, what I think is wrong. And I've learned you can't go far doing that all the time. So
where were you when I was in school? Geez, it'd been nice to have a teacher that understood me. Holy cow.
Well, it took a while. It was annoying at first, but it took a while. And I think it really helped me sympathize and empathize better with other ISTPs and INTPs who just almost get angry when there's something doesn't make sense at a younger age, at least. And I've learned to sort of understand where they're coming from instead of
how old do you teach? Like, how old are your students?
So high school is great, 18 to 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had given up in school by that point. They tried, moving me up to the front of the class because I wasn't paying attention, or then they realized, oh, now he's paying too much attention and making trouble, and I'd be in the back of the class, and that was where I like to be, and then I'd doodle all day. So, but I really liked school when I was young, but then I wanted to keep going further.
I am curious, when you were at school, did you have that critique archetype often in you? I mean, was that, or were you just passive to, like, let's say teachers? Did you feel
yeah, teachers would definitely get mad because I would point out mistakes that they would make or something. And yeah, you're right. Teachers don't like it when the student makes, points out a mistake that they made or something. So, yeah. Or I have a reasonably good memory. So let's say I would be maybe chastised for something a week earlier. If the teacher did anything near what I got in trouble for, I'd be like, hey, remember, point things out and stuff like that. So people don't like that.
Yeah, I had a special trouble with teachers who were pretty incompetent because you'd point things out and then they liked it a lot less. I feel like the more competent ones were more willing to receive feedback.
I think there's a lot of teachers too who just, I don't think they're necessarily bad people, but I don't think it's the right job for them. So, but that could just be, I think when I was a student, I realized that probably at least half the teachers I didn't like. I didn't know anything about MBTI, but I figured it was some type of personality difference. Like, I didn't think they were bad people. It was like oil and water, so.
Yeah, I mean, and just back to the critique archetype thing, and just one thing I really want to say that, let's say I do critique someone or I mention what I feel like is illogical or inconsistent, then there's always this phase of guilt that I experience afterwards because I know they might have been offended or hurt. And I'm curious, Joyce, or any of you guys experience that, like that sense of guilt, that sense of, I want to know the truth, but then after that, sometimes I just feel bad because I would notice the other person's hurt deeply, especially if I care for the person. So that's the other dynamic I experience, is that just guilt. Like, should I have not done that? Should I have, if I had FI, I might have felt better about it, I feel like, but I don't know. Maybe you guys can share.
Yeah. Sometimes you unintentionally hurt someone you care about, and then what do you do there? I think there are certain INTPs who actually deeply crave connection. I know a lot of INTPs who value their extroverted feeling. So they actually deeply want a sense of community or belonging. And like sometimes when the TI gets in the way of that, if you're in a specifically sensitive period of your life, that can be very crushing for an INTP. But then you can also have this swing of wanting to be a loner and you're like, I'm fine with this. You know what?
Yeah, I think when I would criticize or things like that, I'm always we're oftentimes thought to be oblivious. I don't feel oblivious. I mean, I'm a human, so of course I'm oblivious, like everybody is to some extent. I feel like I'm actually almost sometimes overly aware, but that, like you were saying, Andrew, that drive for the truth overrides feeling. But I try not to take things too far, and I try not to take it to a personal level. And usually I can get people to follow my logic, and a lot of times they'll agree with me. But it's also been a difficult thing for me in the workplace, because I think a lot of times when I would get hired at a job, I've never had a career. I've just been a job guy, and you get hired and everybody thinks you're kind of this nice, quiet person, because at first you're just observing, and then after a while, once you start seeing all the, like you said, Ian, the incompetence. And by the way, I'm incompetent at things as well. I realize that, but it's like hard to hold it in, and then you start. And I think it's also difficult when your INTPs were kind of seen as maybe being good at strategy. I'll be 40 here soon, but in my 20s, it's hard to get into a job when you have a strategic mind and you're at the lowest level. It's a very frustrating thing. And I imagine every type kind of goes through something like that with their different logistics, tactics, and all the different things like that. But that's really hard when you kind of have that higher level thinking, but you're at the bottom of the pyramid. So
I absolutely relate to that. For sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you guys ever feel like the smartest person in the room, or no? When you mention competence and competence, it's just a question.
I don't like when I do, but I rarely do. Yeah.
I've been around some pretty people in my life, so I'm happy to seed when somebody knows more than me on a topic, and I don't feel like an expert on anything. I kind of know a little bit about a lot of things, so there's definitely times where I'm pretty sure I'm right, but I don't necessarily think I'm the smartest person in the room necessarily.
Yeah, up until age 18, I definitely felt like that. And then I met some really smart people who sort of gave me a truth check, which was very important. And it kept happening. It wasn't just once. And I think, interestingly enough, I don't know if this is part of this, it started with INTJs who really humbled me. They saw things that I just was way beyond my depth sometimes, and other INTPs also. And then I started meeting other types who are also more intelligent. And so it was a bunch of experiences that definitely in my early 20s humbled me enough. And then after that, I just got used to it. I've met so many people who I generally consider to be smarter than me. But at first, my natural instinct is to feel that, I know that I can seek the truth in better ways than other people. But as I got older, I started to realize there's other ways to seek the truth. And sometimes it's not my way.
I like to say that the truth is there's more than one truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find like INTPs eventually get a wider view of truth. Like they'll have beliefs just as like what Brady said, or everything's a bit of a fiction. And so they loosen up on that like stubbornness that they sometimes have.
Yeah. I definitely experienced that.
And so sometimes when you're talking with people, does it ever get misinterpreted by others? So like I'll give an example of something that Brady shared with me, and it was, you're actually a student of Linda Barron's, and so am I. And she's an INTP, and there was a day where you were challenging something she was saying, and then you guys were talking, and then some of her students intervene. And it's like, I can't believe you're fighting with Linda Barron's. And Linda was like, hey guys, no, we're just being INTPs together. So
yeah, I don't think she took it that way at all, but the other people in the class seemed to think it was like but I don't think that if you listen to Linda, she'll talk about challenging David Kiersey all the time. So I'm like, well, isn't that what you're supposed to do? Like, that was a problem when I was in high school. I thought, oh, when you get to college, you get to like challenge, but I never went to college, so I guess I don't know if that's true or not. But like, that's what I want to do, is challenge people, and it's not because I disagree with them necessarily. It's just purely like like Andrew was saying, you're trying to get to the truth. And I don't know what the truth is. And I think the truth only really exists in the moment, you know, in like the present. And how long is the present? You know, like that's a whole nother topic of discussion. So, you know, just like we can't know the truth of the future, I think it's really hard to nail down the truth of the past as well. So to me, it's just trying to hash it out and figure out the best way to say something that makes sense, I guess, to the most people, but sometimes it ends up just being the INTPs that get it, maybe. So
yeah, I'm trying to think of a similar. I mean, that's happened to me a lot for sure. Where especially if I notice the other person has a strong T in them, then I relax. I feel comfortable. I don't have to filter every single word I say. And then other people, if they will think I'm upset, or I'm trying to challenge the other person, or maybe I'm trying to argue, or whatever it is. But the person I'm talking to never misinterpret my intentions. I just want to go back and forth and get down to the truth, whatever that is, if it even exists. But the people who misinterpret me often, and again, this is not to attack feeling types, but usually it's the feeling types who think I'm, but once I'm surrounded by a lot of thinking types, normally they just know I'm just TIing it. It's just, so I think that's another dynamic I've noticed in my personal life, that if there are a lot of feeling types, I have to be very careful with what I say.
I've also had ESTJs like feel threatened by, like, I'm telling the truth, somehow that diminishes, like, that's contrary to what they're saying, so somehow that diminishes what they're saying. I don't know.
Yeah, the strong introverted sensing of the ESTJ is like, you're defying the rules or my opinion as someone higher in the hierarchy, so I'm offended by that.
I believe I have an ESTJ brother, and so that was an interesting growing up with that. So we get along pretty well, but there's definitely quite a difference between us.
What is that difference between you and your ESTJ brother?
Well, first of all, I'm not 100% certain that's his type. That's just kind of a guess. It seems to be one. I was kind of just the other week, last weekend, I was talking about something that happened when we were kids, and he remembered it differently than me. And I was like, well, he probably does. I think I have a good memory, but I was also younger than him. So it's like I kind of had to see that he was probably right on the memory issue there with the SI. But he was very, so what would he be? Would it be tertiary SE for him? He was very concerned about like his looks and presenting himself well and working his way up the ladder and that kind of stuff. And I was kind of like the opposite of that.
So they have 6-slot extroverted sensing, SE. So
yeah, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah. Some people say their SE is very strong for ESTJs too. Like if you look at, I have a video with Dario Nardi where he talks about the strength of the 6 function. So out of all your shadow functions, usually it's the 6th one that's the strongest. And yeah, like an ESTJ who very much cares about their looks, their image, their success, their achievements. It's a bit of TESI-SE if you can see that in some models.
And the funny thing is, I was just as concerned with my looks, but in like the opposite way. Like, like I wanted to stand out by not fitting in, So I don't know. It was just it was an interesting childhood, that's for sure. We really don't have much in common. He was very much into sports and making money and stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that stuff. It's just that stuff doesn't interest me at all. So I was the only one who wanted to look at the stars with a telescope, let's just say. And too afraid to go out at night alone to do it. So.
And Andrew, you wanted to say something, but
Oh, yeah, I have a friend, ENTJ, and he just says exactly what's on his mind, and whenever he wants to critique me, he'll just exactly say what he's thinking, and I absolutely love it. I just love it. And so we get to go back and forth for a long time, and we get to argue, discuss anything. So I don't know, but yeah, I don't have any ESTJs. I don't know if that would work out the same way, but I definitely have another ENTJ friend who also, it's the same thing. They know they can just tell me whatever they're thinking, no matter how ruthless it may sound. They can just, and I can take it in, and we can just discuss and go back and forth, and it's great. It's great.
Ian, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I'm just thinking what Andrew said. Yeah, I feel the same way. Sometimes I have trouble if there's like actually some emotion attached to what they're saying, but if it's like pure just thinking, like no emotion attached, like that is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, so are there any settings in which you can look very socially skilled? So like have you guys ever developed that sense of like needing to get into your FE? And does that mask eventually like come off? Like let's say with INTPs, like sometimes INTPs can learn social interaction almost like an algorithm at times. So, like, understanding through mistakes in the past, they're able to act in a way where they don't make those mistakes again. But like, so they can put on a very extroverted feeling front if they feel like the situation they need to do that. But like, eventually, when you get to know them, the TI will eventually start trickling in, and then they'll seem more like a critic, and it might be shocking to a more sensitive person.
I mean, I have an example, maybe. I don't know if it's quite what you're looking for, but like I said, I'm not really an expert on anything particularly. I know a little bit about a lot of things, it seems like. I was part of a pretty large mushroom club when I lived out west, and we had a huge like mushroom show every year where we would go out and collect mushrooms and put them on display, and thousands of people would come through and look at literally thousands of mushrooms on display, all named and by genus and family and species and all that stuff, taxonomy and stuff. And I did book sales, and we sold like I don't know $10,000 worth of books in a weekend, and I would have to talk to people. So I knew people in the club who were like real mushroom experts, like mycologists and things like that. And I never felt that I was at their level, but the vast majority of the people coming through this thing over the weekend knew less than me. So I was an expert, and I was oftentimes less intimidating than the actual experts. So I would end up talking to these people about what I knew, and that always feels good because then I feel like it allows your feeling to come out more because it's like you're talking about something you're actually interested in as opposed to like sports or something, which I can talk about sports for a while and stuff. Like I don't hate sports, but really not interested in that stuff very much. So when people are interested in what I'm interested in, I think I'd probably come across more like an ENTP and maybe get that kind of playful FE third, like my functions kind of like switch or something like that. So
Yeah, or even when you're drunk, like I think the inner ENTP comes out in INTPs when they drink for some of them.
it did for me. I got a lot of practice in my 20s as an ENTP living in a city under the influence of alcohol. So
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. The thing is, with the mask thing, when I was younger, it was the mask would come off very quickly, and the older I get, the more my stamina grows with my FE. But the other thing I will say is, the more I grow my FE, the more it's not just a mask anymore. The more it starts to become united or part of my TI. So it's not this completely black and white. At least the phase I'm in right now, I'm starting to appreciate FE as a serious thing, not just as let me just master this art and just charm a bunch of people, and then after that, once they get to know me, like surprise, take off the mask. It's more like no, it's becoming part of my core. The more I integrate it, so it's still a split. Obviously, it's still my inferior function. But the more I grow, the more I go through things, go through life, and go through good times, bad times. I start to feel like FE is becoming part of who I am, not just a thing that I use to put a mask. I will never become a feeling type, of course. I'm not saying that, but there's some type of, and John Beebe talks about this, the TIFE axis. It starts to become really an axis. It's not just a toy I use.
Oh, look, Carl Jung would be so proud of you and your individuation here, just incorporating the two sides of opposites and
Right, exactly.
merging.
Carl Jung. He called it the transcendental function when that happens. But I'm beginning to experience that. Yeah, beginning. There's still a split, but I'm starting to really take FE more seriously.
Yeah, you're definitely gonna have to teach me because I'm having the opposite problem. I'm like, the older I get, I'm more like, just I don't want to deal with this. So
I was kind of forced into dealing with it when I have 2 daughters. So I think that was kind of a gift that maybe I didn't have sons, because I would have probably TI'd everything with them. And I think one of my daughters is probably an ISFJ, so the FE is kind of, I need to use that more. So kids will do that to you, I guess.
And I will say for me, like, it's like my FE, and Joyce, you mentioned something, you talked about that once. So my FE doesn't grow without my FI. Like, there's a deep, deep, profound relationship, and I cannot figure it out yet. I cannot put it in words. And I want to read more about that, this relationship between my demon, or whatever. Is it the demon, guys? Is it?
Yeah, Damon.
There's something very, very profoundly deep in terms of the connection between these two, because my FE is never alone. There's always FI attached to it somehow. And I just cannot grasp that relationship, because I don't know what it is. But when there's an FE, usually there's FI somewhere in the corner, and I can feel it within me. It's not just towards people, it's towards moral principles, deep moral principles that I know I don't have much, because FE is the worst in me, but I start to experience it as guilt. And earlier I talked about guilt, remember, guys? I don't know if that was FE, that was more FI.
Yeah, I totally know what you're talking about. I sometimes have trouble untangling like which part is FE and which part is TI and which part is FI, and it's hard to, I don't know.
Yeah, I as a kid, I think I may have come across more as an INFP. I felt I was teased by my brothers quite a bit for being emotional. And then it just turned off at a certain point. So I was curious if you guys had a similar experience. And it was tied to a lot of moral things. So I was very aware of, I felt like I was very aware of the world. Like, while most kids are watching like Spider-Man and X-Men, I was watching like nature documentaries and World War II documentaries, and was very interested in trying to understand why bad things happened and why nobody seemed to care about it. And then I got to the point where I just like, I guess I don't need to care about it. And now that I'm older, it's like, and I have kids, it's like, yeah, I guess I need to start caring about it again, because I have kind of an investment in the future. So curious if you guys had that similar thing with your childhoods or not, maybe.
Yeah, I totally relate to what you're saying about having like feeling like, why is no one doing anything about this, and then like trying to do things, and then like it almost feels like just like rallying the group is not my strong suit sometimes. So sometimes I just give up, and then, but it always feels good to have like a strong core of like, oh, I believe this is right, and I'm going to do it no matter what. I don't know. I feel like this is a general human thing. I don't know.
Well, it is and it isn't, but I think that INTPs experience it a certain way. So a lot of INTPs actually report having strong moral principles. A lot of moral philosophers are actually INTPs, because TI is very contextually like trying to build an understanding of the situation and create timeless principles in a sense. So those become timeless moral principles at times too, when it really cements and it makes sense. You're like, this has to be the case. Because at the end of the day, all human beings are emotional beings. Science says that we're just irrationality wrapped in intellectualization. We're all very emotional, but INTPs usually have a phase of strong morality. They call the eighth function your role play function. So at times, TI dominance can look like they have FI at times through that moral principles you guys are all talking about.
Well, I think as a child, for myself, speaking kind of culturally, growing up in the Midwest in the United States, you know, I was raised not super religious family, but clearly like Christian principles were, you know, do unto others kind of thing. And it's like, so we're supposed to do this do unto others, but like, you know, there's wars going on. Like, what, we're not living this principle that I was taught we're supposed to live by. And I didn't get that as a kid, because I just didn't have, I didn't have the awareness I thought I did. I had a lot of awareness of what was going on in the world, but I didn't have a way to kind of like, I didn't have that framework yet to like start to kind of put it all together into any kind of hierarchy of understanding. It was just all there. So yeah, that was really confusing thinking back to my childhood. Like you're told we're supposed to behave a certain way, and then people all around you aren't behaving in this way. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's like INTPs can be compassionate too. They're human.
Well, I think that's something that bugs me still today. We're thought not to be particularly empathic. I feel the opposite. When I was a child, I felt very empathic towards animals. And I feel like empathy for me stretches more across time for people of the past and the future more than it does people in the moment. So whereas maybe like the catalysts, the NFs feel empathy more in the present, maybe looking towards the future, I sometimes look at the past and am annoyed at how maligned some of these historical figures are these days. Not trying to justify everything they ever did, but like we're looking at it through a totally different lens and we're just throwing people under the bus. And that really hurts, because there's people who gave their life for certain things, or people who spent their lives in prison because they had an idea. Was it Galileo or someone like that ended up going to prison because he had an idea, so I have like empathy for, I feel like my empathy stretches across time more than it does in the present. It's hard to have empathy in the present because there's, like I said, I think truth kind of exists in the present moment. So how can I have empathy if I'm trying to get the truth in the moment?
Huh, that's an interesting way of seeing it.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel the same. Like, but I do feel like a more of attachment to my past self than most people. Maybe that's SI, I don't know.
I definitely have more attachment to my past as well, for sure. It's always there.
Yeah. When you start to explore certain topics, I know, Brady, you're into history. That's going to influence things. That will create a predisposition towards a sense of empathy towards people of history too. Because it's almost like when people read a lot of books or they're absorbed in understanding historical ideas, you feel like you can understand how it's like to be in that time period. And so it is very grieving that a lot of people weren't treated well. Like when it came to figuring out that it wasn't bad air, but germs were killing people in hospitals because people would touch dead bodies and then help women give birth. Someone proposed that it was the germs that possibly could be the problem and we need to wash our hands. And then they were seen as crazy. And I think he eventually went to a mental asylum too. So that's just tragic that people with good ideas, how they're treated a certain way. Well,
I mean, this reminds me of I always have a frustration how people like seem to prioritize certain moral quandaries versus like they seem to severely undervalue small things or things that they can't directly tie to an outcome. So like preventing a disease, people don't seem to understand like the magnitude of the impact, and they like seem to overvalue saving a few lives. It's just weird.
Yeah, very utilitarian. Kiersey calls the NT types, the rationals, utilitarian in that sense. It's like
I feel like the real heroes are the people who prevented millions of deaths, not the people who like in the middle of a crisis help save, a few 100,000.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that like when I'm in a panel of INTPs, I'm the one who generates the conversation. If I was with a panel of ENTPs, they would be the ones lifting the conversation away, and I would try to get a word in edgewise, and it would be difficult. So, I guess, what about the INTP personality do you guys relate to the most?
For me, it's most of it. Is that what you mean? Like, what parts of the description fits you, or?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think I would assume that it's most of it for all of you guys. But I'm wondering about like specific parts that like really sold to you. Like, wow, I can relate to that.
For me, it was always the introverted thinking, extroverted feeling dynamic. The more I read about that, the more I see it in my social interactions, in my personal life. That was the first thing that I noticed right away, and it helped me understand a lot of things about myself that were problematic or felt it was problematic. So the more I read about the whole TIFE tension, it was just like, oh, okay. And then after that, the NESI, that also clicked very much for me. And then having TI as my dominant function and NE sort of helping out or observing, providing knowledge for or insights or perceptions to my TI, my judging function. When I first read that, I was like, oh my God, yes, that's exactly what I do. So yeah, it was really, that's what sold me. And the first time I read the description, but the general description, I didn't care about that much. It felt like astrology at first, but once I got deep into that, that's when it starts to click.
Yeah, so the functions for you really made it make sense. I know some INTPs too who can also relate to even the general description they get from 16 personalities. And that isn't that accurate, but even then they're like, man, it just got me right the first time. It gets a lot of people wrong, but it got me right.
Yeah, sometimes there are something like, that makes sense, but really it's the functions for me. That was it. And the dynamic, especially which one is dominant, which one is tertiary, all of that, and which one's
Yeah.
inferior, and the inferior being very problematic for INTPs. That really, really helped me a lot with a lot of questions I've had when I was younger. What's wrong with my FE? What's wrong with my feeling department? What's going on there? There's an issue. There's a struggle, seems like, and logic came much easier. And as I'm sure you all relate to that. So that's to me, that's what sold me in. Sorry. Yeah, you guys.
Yeah, exactly. Spoken like a true Jungian, like functions all the way.
Right.
I'll agree that it kind of seemed like astrology to me a little bit, and then ironically, the more I get into astrology, which I'm not into that much, it's like maybe there's something to that too. But anyways, it's when I read the description, it fit me so well. I was like slightly anxious, like, oh my gosh, if anybody reads this, they're gonna know how I work and they're gonna like have an advantage or something. And that I got over that really quickly. But I'll speak to some of the things that annoy me about it is when they give like and maybe this is stuff people aren't supposed to do, but the websites will like jobs that would be good for INTPs or whatever type, and it's like I don't fit a lot of that stuff. Like I just don't. So true to like the Enneagram 5, the iconoclast type thing. I've just always went against the grain. I've kind of forged my own path, and it kind of irks me sometimes because it's like I had this desire to go to college, and because I figured that's where the real learning was taking place, not in high school. And I even felt kind of let down by that when I moved. I lived in Seattle for a number of years, and I'd go through the university and I'd see these kids, and I'm like, this is college? Like these people are in college? Like it just seemed like silly to me. And I sometimes wonder where I would be if I would have went to college, and I'm happy with where I'm at now, so it doesn't really bother me now. And the more I think about it, it's like, well, I'd probably be in debt. That's one place I'd be, and I'm not really in debt, so that's good. But I think it shut a lot of doors for me in terms of connecting with people. I've met a few INTPs who work in the tech industry, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm around INTPs all the time." I'm like, I can count like on my hands the number of INTPs that I think on my fingers, I guess on my hands. I've met. I mean, it seems to be. I don't know if the percentages are accurate, like the 3 to 5% or whatever, but in my anecdotal experience, it is. It is correct. I just don't know that many INTPs. So, I kind of think on some intuitive level, I knew that in college, maybe that's where I would meet my people, and I didn't go to college. So, but like I said, in some ways, I'm kind of glad I didn't, because I'm not $50,000+ in debt and making coffee, which is what a lot of people in Seattle are doing. So, sorry, don't mean to rip on Seattle.
Brady, I'm curious. Do you like being kind of like different / rebellious / I don't know how to say it.
Iconoclast.
Yeah, I don't know if I like it. It's just who I am. It's just I'm not really like, I don't really go against the grain. I'm like a foreign object that's been pounded into the piece of wood. That's how I feel. And I felt that way for a long time. And when I was a kid, I'm left-handed. So I used to think, well, it's because I'm left-handed, or something like. So I was kind of typing in a way, because left-handed people do fit certain type things, kind of. So do I like it? I mean, I don't know. It's who I am. I kind of like it. I'm happy with who I am now. When I was younger, it was kind of like I didn't get people, because I wasn't around them. And I grew up in a small town, so I don't know if this is true, but it would seem like a lot of people with INTP preferences probably move away from those small towns and kind of, coalesce around cities where technology is and stuff like that. And I tried that. I lived in Seattle for a while, kind of hoping I'd find like a back doorway into like a laboratory or something. It didn't happen. So I was just a janitor. I just cleaned up for people. So
Yeah, it seems like with INTPs, some of them will move to different places. Like they'll have this moment where they're like, I need to burn my life down and create a new social group, or burn my life down and move to this new place like Seattle or city, or like it's kind of like this maybe unrest inside, or like something is like I want life to be different in some way, and then an INTP will make a dramatic shift, and then it either sticks and it works or it doesn't, and then they're still as miserable in this new transition as they were before. But there is this desire to like uproot in some ways that INTPs tend to have. You also mentioned, Brady, a sense of dissatisfaction. Like you were expecting college to be a certain way and it wasn't. And you felt that way about some of the history books that you read too. Like you're expecting them to have something new or novel thoughts, and then they're just quoting books you've already read before there too. So I think that's a common INTP experience where you wish you were learning something more challenging, but then you've already been very knowledgeable in this, and you're just reading like a regurgitation in a sense. The part of you that wants to learn is disappointed.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like I seek novelty quite a bit, and I lived in Hawaii for a while too, like right out of high school, and I remember being kind of disappointed I got there, and it's like, this is Hawaii, and it's like, but it's still like trees and dirt and the sky. I mean, it's like a totally different place from Michigan where I live, but it's still Earth. And I had a similar experience when I was a kid. I always loved aviation, and I finally got to go flying, and I was pretty young, but I thought like the clouds were going to be this thing that like caught on the wings of the plane, and it's like, it's just fog. It's just fog. I experienced this on the ground. Like, what? I was very disappointed about that, So I've had to temper that a little bit in my life, and it just maybe not expect so much. But it seems like the more or the less I expect things to be, the more kind of fascinating I find things. So like I said, I'm going to be 40 here in a couple weeks, so I'm kind of approaching the top of the hill, right? Like, so you get to 40s, the top of the hill, and it's all supposedly downhill. But I'm hoping my hill, it's, if you've ever been to the mountains, you think that's the top of the hill, and you get to it, and you realize it keeps going. And I'm hoping mine just keeps going up, because things have actually gotten better for me as my life's went on. And I've heard that other INTPs say that too, that we're kind of slow to develop. Things just seem so frustrating when I was in the teens and 20s, but 30s were pretty good, and I'm hoping 40s will be better. And then I don't really want to think about 50s too much, but that's a decade off. But yeah, so, but anyways, yeah, as far as like the book thing you were saying, yeah, it's happened so many times. Like I tend to seek out the primary sources first and then try and gather the other stuff. And yeah, you just find out it's just a regurgitation, and you're like, why did I buy this book? I already have this book in a different book. So, or you can find it online for free. So.
Have you guys ever had this issue where like you're asking an expert something and they answer like a kind of a sort of your question, and then you want to like press on and be like, no, actually answer my question. And then at a certain point you just realize they don't know. And like this repeatedly happens.
I have something similar. Like, for example, like APTI, I was a member of that for a while, and a lot of times there'll be open questions at the end when the speaker does something. You can ask questions, and I don't even think it's worth raising my hand, because when I ask one question, to me the questions keep going, and this is just, okay, I want to keep asking questions, but that FE thing, like I don't want to be that guy who's taking up the whole. I've been in things where there's like not just that or something, other times where there's like somebody taking over the question time, and it's like their questions aren't even that good, you know. Like it's like, so it's easier to be an observer, you know. So that's what I tend to do, and I have a whole life and conversation going on in my head. Joyce, I watched your video the other day about the inner monologue. I have an inner monologue. It never shuts up. It's constantly going. And I came across that stuff a few years ago that some people don't. And it was just like, what? How do you operate? Like, I can accept it now, but yeah, if that answers that a little bit. Maybe, I don't know.
How many of you guys here have inner monologues versus not? Just curious. Is there a voice narrating your experience at all times?
I mean, I have back and forth, like think out loud. Does that count? Or
It's like there's literally like in movies where there's a narrator, like, but you are the narrator narrating things. I'm not describing this well.
I will just say real quick. Mine isn't a narration of what I'm doing. Mine is like I'm constantly interviewing myself, like, so that in the event that somebody wants to talk about something I'm interested in, I could, you know, data dump on them or whatever, or going over things that I know. So if I'm really into, because a lot of my interests are like, you know, a circle, and I find lines from one interest to another, and I'm constantly looking for people who have similar interests as me, and I find it hard to find those people, at least locally. So then I get bored with my own thinking on one, and I jump to a new topic, and then I'm just constantly interviewing myself about like what I know on that subject, or a conversation I might have. It's not with anybody, it's just like what I'm doing now. It's exactly what I'm doing now. It's just in my head all the time. So
Fascinating.
sometimes I might experience that, but not as often as I think maybe, because I don't. Yeah, I definitely have a back and forth. Like I'll think like, no, this is, or daydreaming. Is that the same thing as inner monologue? Would that count as?
I think so. I daydreamed a lot more when I was younger.
Yeah, when I was much younger, I daydreamed a lot. I mean, sometimes I still do, but when I was younger, I definitely almost daily. I don't know if that counts as. Yeah. This reminds me of. Have you read the book The Origin of Consciousness? I'm looking at it right now, and the breakdown of the bicameral mind, which talks about development of consciousness through hearing voices or the gods. Has anyone? No, ignore. Yeah, it's exactly what you're talking about. I was just looking at the book early today, and it describes what you're talking about. Yeah. So.
That sounds interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So my hypothesis is that with every type, there are people who do have inner monologues and don't have inner monologues, but the way you experience an inner monologue will be unique to your type. So other INTPs with an inner monologue will have similar-ish experiences.
Sometimes I don't hear anything, but a lot of the time, like it'll be like an idea. Like when the idea comes in, it'll be spoken out loud, kind of.
See, for me, ideas are more like visual. I don't. The only way I can really describe it is like some of those fractal things you'll see on like online. The the movement, just constantly zooming into something. When I get ideas, it's very much like that. It's like these shapes. I don't really know how to explain it, and then they somehow form together, and then I try and put words to it, which is difficult sometimes. But yeah, I do visualize stuff though too, like some of those people were talking about, like different houses I live in. I have like a 3D model in my head of different places I've been, even places I haven't been. So for instance, on YouTube, there's a channel called Battleship New Jersey, and it's all about this World War II battleship. And I've never been on that ship, and I certainly don't know every room on it because there's like 1,100 rooms on it or something. It's like a skyscraper sized ship. But like, I can put together this little three-dimensional model, and I can kind of walk through what I do know is there, and I can imagine what the other rooms, I can fill it in because I have been on the USS Midway, which is an World War II aircraft, or post World War II aircraft carrier, I think. So I know what that kind of stuff looks like, so I can just kind of like fill in the blanks with kind of like what I know from other things that are similar. And I can do that pretty good. Like I have a decent amount of property, and I have trails all over it, and I know like every square inch of it, and I can like walk through it in my head. It's like I have a Google Earth in my head, and some of the places I've been I can zoom into and like manipulate and see. But it's kind of wispy. I can't hold it together for like a long time. Like I couldn't, like I'm not a good artist. Like I can't draw stuff really well from what I remember, but I could do technical stuff. Maybe like I could draw out like the blueprints of a house that I've lived in or something really easily, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. There's this theory they have in the Myers-Briggs where I don't know if it's true or not, so I thought maybe we could test it, is that thinking types are more likely to have a map representation of areas, like what Brady was describing, but more of like an objective view, like a grid view in a sense of areas. Whereas like feeling types are a little bit more likely to see things relationally. So like let's say, oh, the place you're looking for is next to the Walmart that's next to this lamppost. And the reason why they say this is because like with feelers, it's more relational. So they're thinking about the relationship between Walmart to the area you're looking to like feelers are more likely to look at the relationship between landmarks immediately there, whereas thinkers have more of a grid-like approach of memorizing spaces and where they're located because it's more of the systematizing location. I don't know how true that is, but I just thought it's something that we could explore. You guys can disprove or approve.
I have like I almost have to rebuild the global thing from the relational stuff. So I kind of have like my overall view is not super strong sometimes.
Yeah. So it's like middle of the road for sure. I guess when you're telling someone the location of somewhere, how do you say it?
Like, you're assuming that I talk to people on a regular basis. Yeah, I don't know. Like like I said, that's in my head. It's just like Google Earth, and I sometimes wonder, like, was it always like that when I was a kid, or did my like the way I remember stuff like that evolve with technology? Like, I don't know. It's hard for me. And are my memories of my childhood now what they were when I was a kid? I don't think they were. I think it's me trying to, because I didn't know what I know now then. So I remember my hometown wasn't that big and it seemed confusing at one time in my life. Now it doesn't. It seems incredibly small and easy to navigate. And I can kind of, like I said, yeah, it's just like Google Earth or something. You know, I can kind of like fly around in my head. Like I say, when I lived in Seattle, I lived in a number of different places and I remember them all pretty well. I mean, not exactly, but pretty well. And I remember the sizes. Like I bet if I drew some of the apartments, I could draw them to scale reasonably well. So it helps when you live in like studio apartments. There's not a lot of scale to it, but you know.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I noticed this habit you have when you talk, Brady, and it's like you'll question the things that you say. Like, I don't even know if what I remembered in the past is really what happened in the past, or is that like it's like a questioning and refinement. I'm not fully capturing it correctly, but I noticed like it's like when you guys say seeking the truth, I really do see the emphasis on seeking itself. Like there is a seeking as you're talking and refinement. But how about you, Andrew? Like, how do you describe locations? Like, are you like, do you like know locations based off of like a grid, like understanding the objective location? Or do you tend to be more relational? Like, oh, this is next to the fire hydrant that's like next to Walmart.
Yeah, let me think. I'm so bad with location, direction, and maps in my head that I suck at both. The truth, when I need directions, I just look up Google Maps and I walk. And most of my friends, feeling type or thinking type, they can just look at the map and see right away. They know where to go. I have to follow literally like as in the directions, you know, in Google Map, as in like I have to hit. You know what I'm saying? Like.
Yeah, you're so unaware of your surroundings that
Yes, I have to put the arrow and I just follow the arrow and I just go where it goes. I cannot, I'm so unaware of everything. Look, relational, locational. It's so bad that I'm not sure if I'm the right person. And
yeah.
I've noticed other INTPs are way better than me, relatively speaking, at these
Yeah.
things. I'm just so, even when I'm driving, I don't know how I survived. Like, I really don't know. I don't know how I drive all these years. I don't see what's in front of me. I subconsciously sort of sense that there's a car there, so I don't hit it, but it's never consciously done.
Yeah, I have an ISTP friend who's like super like shocked when that happens. I'm like, that's like my normal living condition. It's just like, it's there. I kind of see it. I'm not gonna hit it. It's fine.
Yeah. All right. So we have Ian and Andrew who are not fully aware of what's around their surroundings, and then Brady does have the thinker thing where you have a global representation of locations or things. That's interesting. So this is just I'm just collecting statistics, guys. You can fall out of trend with this. It's not true for everyone, but it's just fun to collect. Okay, so I've had people ask me to leave the silent pauses in INTP videos, and I'm thinking, should I keep in all of the silent pauses just to represent the INTP type more accurately? Or
People might be too bored with that stuff.
Oh.
You're trying to get clicks, right? You want to get
Exactly.
It's up to you. Whatever you guys want. I don't care.
I don't care. I'm just upset that I messed up the SE thing still. The ESTJ. Oh my gosh, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
I actually do want to say though about the grid thing. That's something I struggle with, and one of the I've always had an interest in math, but even the MBTI, like the gridded out stuff, it still like messes with me when I have to look at that. That's one of the reasons I think the Enneagram is so much more popular. It's just easier to like look at, and like I think it's just so much more easy to kind of like get a sense of it. I think the MBTI stuff is pretty confusing at first. At least it was for me. It took a while, and I still struggle with even though I know all the cognitive functions, I have to like sit there and think about it. When I spout it off like that, I usually mess it up. I don't know if you guys are like that too or something, but it gets a little. It's not a cozy system, that's for sure.
Yeah. That is true. The Myers-Briggs can make it more easily understandable, for sure. Yeah. I've had people tell me that the Myers-Briggs system can sometimes seem a bit elitist in the sense that you have to be interested to understand it, or else it's hard for beginners to get functions. It's difficult. With the Enneagram, one of the creators, Naranjo, self-identified with INTP preferences. And he actually was the one to make the Enneagram about neuroses. So if you read the Enneagram, you'll know that it takes a negative angle towards personality. And the INTP was like finding ways to like almost critique or understand the darker side of personality.
Yeah,
Which
it's the opposite with me. I never got along with the Enneagram much, and I never got into it. But almost every INTP I know is in love with it, but I never clicked with me. But I do agree with the Myers-Briggs sometimes with the functional stuff. It does get confusing for me, and I can't keep up. But especially when I'm talking to TE people, say an INTJ or an ENTJ, maybe even ENTP. It's like da-da-da-da-da. It's like all these FIF. They just start, talking about functions at such a fast rate that I just can't. I'm very slow. I like to, take my time. But that's my other issues with other people who are really good at Myers-Briggs, but they're just. It's almost like they operate so fast with these things, and I need time to process every single thing. So
yeah,
that's my issue with MBTI sometimes.
yeah. And then like Ian he's also not that big of a fan of Enneagram. He's like meh about it, so he relates to you, Andrew.
I'm kind of the same way. So Enneagram with me, I found MBTI, and then quickly, like within a day, I was like, oh, here's this Enneagram thing. Let me kind of learn this. And so I was kind of using the Enneagram and MBTI, kind of the way Linda Behrens has the lenses. I was kind of trying to use the two to kind of understand me, through two different, even though they're different systems. But I haven't read as much about it's kind of my theory, and I could be wrong on this. But I feel like feeling types gravitate more towards the Enneagram and thinking types more to MBTI. I think that's pretty clear. I mean, the Enneagram's used a lot in like churches and yoga and New Age stuff, which seems to attract a lot of the feeling types, and vice versa. And I've also seen that MBTI's kind of fallen out of favor recently, it seems, to some extent, which I think is funny. And I think that's a novelty thing, kind of like social media. You know, people are always constantly looking for the next thing, and I do think MBTI, or I don't want to say MBTI, but cognitive functions, that type of thinking, it really needs like an update on their marketing, and I don't know. That's just my opinion. It's too HR, and nobody likes HR. When HR comes to your office or your workplace and like, we're doing an HR day, nobody's like jumping for joy. They're like, oh God, I want to get my work done and go home. I don't want to listen to this person who could go to somebody higher up than my boss with a complaint. Nobody wants that. I don't know. HR is not going to change the world. You know, HR is annoying. Nobody likes it. So I think they need to dispense with the HR stuff and kind of see what the Enneagram's doing with the kind of personal, kind of family, kind of stuff like that. That's my opinion of it.
Can I ask you a question, Brady? Do you hate Toby from The Office?
I've never seen The Office. I don't have a TV. I've never owned a TV as an adult. So I don't watch movies.
So Michael Scott hates Toby, and he's the HR guy, and it's a whole.
Okay.
For those who like The Office, though.
I had an HR guy I didn't like. I think he mistyped me too. I think he was using some type of typing system, and I think he wildly mistyped me. And he called me up one night on my personal phone, and I think he found out really quickly that he mistyped me because I gave him a logical beatdown about all the stuff that I thought he was doing wrong. But hey, that's what you get when you call my personal phone.
Wait, Joyce, weren't you HR at some point?
I was, and then I escaped. It's not for me. HR, the modal type for it is ESFJ, and so it's very routine, policy oriented, and so my soul was dying a little bit, so I left. Yeah, but what I liked about HR, it was my step into giving presentations and workshops on the Myers-Briggs, so I'm very thankful on that. So you're right, it does have to be less HR. Totally agree. We need to have the marketing of Enneagram here. So I do think that the Enneagram has a lot of feelers like it. It's very well liked in therapy. And so a lot of therapists are overwhelmingly female and overwhelmingly feelers. There are a lot of thinkers that are therapists too, but they're not the majority, I would say.
I thought you were going to say they were the good ones.
They actually find it easier in some ways. Like I know an ENTJ therapist, he finds it easy because he doesn't absorb people's emotions, where he finds that his colleagues do. So, but he's compassionate. Like he cares about people, but he can put on a shield in the moment with your emotions. So, just like you were talking about, Brady, the caring about the past and the future emotions, like the timeless emotions, but less of the in the moment feelers. Yeah. There's a term, short-term empathy versus long-term empathy. So it seems like Brady, you in particular, have a lot of long-term empathy. So intellectual empathy and cognitive empathy, whereas the in-the-moment short-term empathy, the more in-the-moment mirror neuron sensation or the contagion, the emotional contagion in the moment, you can find some way to get less affected by it in a way. Or
I definitely have met like people in my past that I'll never see again in my life, and I still think about them and like hope they're doing okay and stuff. You know, but at the time I didn't really maybe ever share that with them or something. So that's always been a hard thing for me, is to say like goodbye to people that like you might not see again, and you kind of connected with them. Like I used to work at a group home years ago, and like the residents there, it's like I don't even know if they're still alive. They were getting kind of older, but I still like wonder, I wonder how so and so's doing, and I still like, I hope they're treating them good and stuff like that. And that was like 15 years ago, so.
Yeah. Well, that is a wholesome note to end this panel on. So thank you everyone for coming out. And so I appreciate, Brady, your stories. They really help make type alive. And so something that's great about ABTI and also Brady is like the desire to put type into your own experiences. Because sometimes when people talk about type, it's intellectual because it's a bunch of intuitives exchanging theories. And so also taking that time to tell people about your life it's what makes it 3D. So I appreciate that. And thank you, Andrew, for participating in these past few panels. You'll see a little bit more of Andrew. And yeah. It seems like, Andrew brought up the topic of nostalgia, which Ian and Brady also deeply resonate in ways too, of people they've cared about. Maybe they haven't vocalized it. This really brings home that you might mean more to people than you think. So oftentimes, very few people will actually take the time to tell you that they're thinking of you, but it actually happens a lot. This is just a friendly reminder to anyone who's watching. You matter. You're made of matter, and you're lovely. Okay. And Ian, thanks for making this panel. You came probably because I asked you, and so I appreciate the FE letting me peer pressure you into this. And so, thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you all in the next episode.